Hello, citizens. This is DEADBUG. Friend, lover, father. Father of many, actually, and some of them from those third world godless countries. And I gotta support them all. Well, not the ones from the third world countries. Their lawyers can't touch me. But anyhows, that's why I'm now on Spotify and Apple and other finest sites where you enjoy your podcasts. And I'm posting weekly. So go sign up now. Go ahead. I'll wait. Go on. Jesus, you really let yourself go. What are you, a deuce and a half? And I'll tell you what, as an extra incentive, if you type in my dead hamster's name, Mr. Squiggles, I'll give you a 30% discount. I'm just messing with you. It don't cost anything to be over there, so even yous on welfare can enjoy my content. I'll see you over there. Links are in the description. And now it's time for our feature presentation. You are about to partake in a DEADBUG podcast. But remember, you scallywags, my content ain't for the faint of heart. And it certainly isn't for children. So if you are ready to proceed, I would ask of you one thing. That is, to dim the lights, shut that pleasure-giving mouth of yours up, smoke 'em if you got 'em, and enjoy. There are places in this world where people just don't disappear, but they are taken, not in the way we usually think. No ransom, no robbery, not even revenge. They're taken for something older than law, older than reason, older than the idea that a human life is something you're not allowed to touch. Because in some parts of the world, that rule never really took hold. And when people vanish in those places, the explanation doesn't come from police reports. It comes from whispers, from belief. And belief, when enough people share it, can become more powerful than evidence. Because belief, it don't need proof. It just needs fear. And this is another tale from the Shadow People. There are many tales that need to be told. Those of the young and those of the old. Tales of merriment and tales of woe. Those of limerick and those of show. For many which of whose participants may never know. But perhaps there are those whose tales should never be told. And those are the tales of the Shadow People. Northern South Africa, especially a place like KwaZulu-Natal, is one of those regions that feels split between two worlds. On one side, it's what the holiday brochures are selling you. Game reserves, safari drives, elephants moving through the brush like they got nowhere else to be. like you're in a Tarzan movie. It's raw, beautiful, and a long way from the kind of life most people listening to this are used to. But underneath that, there's a harder reality. South Africa has one of the highest violent crime rates in the world. The fact is, statistically, you got more of a chance of getting murdered in South Africa than you do of finding a good burger joint. There's a strong divide between rich and poor, often still falling along those racial stereotypes and lines from the past. Not much has changed. You got secure, fenced-off, beautiful estates for the haves with their electric fences, sitting not far from the communities where people are just getting by, day to day, sitting around swatting flies and eating bananas, just like the movies. Except they ain't wearing loincloths anymore. They're wearing rip-off Adidas tracksuits, and they're angry about it. I guess they figured that they once owned those planes, running around with their asses out, killing the antelopes and whatnot. And I guess they figure they're now owed some sort of reparation. Although the rich feel they've already received too much charity. But most people visiting, they never get to see that side. They got some guy driving their bus named Tutuka, who's just happy to be alive. Big shit-eating grin on his face, screaming into a distorted microphone.
Tutuka, say over there. Tutuka, see the line over there.
And he'll probably do a little dance for you as you drop some of your spare change into his sweaty palm. A goddamn travesty, if you ever see how proud their people once were. I know, 'cause I saw that movie Tarzan with Bo Derek. But the tourists, on the other hand, on those packaged holidays, they get to see the beautiful sunsets, the landscapes, and the wildlife. But like a lot of places that look stunning on the surface, there's another layer to it. A layer that they don't advertise. And a British woman named Lorna McSorley, 71 years old, was one of those tourists. And she went for a walk, and she didn't come back. Not a hike, not an expedition, a walk, a marked route on a paper map that she was carrying. She'd been staying at a resort near Ghost Mountain, a place that already sounds like it belongs in a creepy story. Her and her partner, whose name don't matter much to this story, had set off on a hike. He figured it was around 2:30, following a circular route set on the map where guests could take it independently or with a guide. But he'd forgotten his hat, and as it was getting hot, he turned back. But McSorley continued alone, but strayed from the route marked on the hotel's map and was spotted by a farmer wandering through a maze of sugar plantations. Why she chose to ignore the map, who knows? But that decision, that tiny everyday decision we all make, was the last clean moment in her timeline. As she seemingly, or at least to outsiders, looked like she stepped off the edge of nowheres into the abyss. When Lorna didn't return that evening at around 5:30 for her all-you-can-eat buffet dinner, well, her partner knew that there was something wrong, because Lorna had a reputation for always being first in the line. And when he reported it, the search teams came in fast. Helicopters, dogs, drones. But there were nothing. No clothing, no remains, no sign of a fall, of a wild animal attack, or even the usual debris that marks a body returning to the environment. But they did find one thing, a crumpled up tourist map. pushed into the ground with a boot, almost like it were making a point. And the fact that it had been purposefully crumpled into a tight ball, wow, that made it seem even more sinister. And that's where this stops being a missing persons case and becomes something else. Because when nothing is found, people start asking the question nobody wants to ask out loud. A farm manager had been the last person to see Lorna, wearing glasses, a white t-shirt, and carrying a bum bag. He said she'd asked for directions, she seemed in a relaxed mood, and there was nothing wrong. When a seemingly extensive police investigation failed to yield anything, several businesses in the area put together some money and hired foreign private detectives, mercenaries if you will, to do their own investigation. And they in turn hired local guides and trackers who knew the area better than any cops could. Their regular day job was to protect the endangered wildlife and commercial farms and businesses in the area. They were better equipped than the police, even having connections to the mobile phone companies and able to get data from that area, which would later yield startling revelations. But the fact that very little was mentioned in the media of the crimes to protect the tourism trade was even more startling. After Lorna McSorley vanished, something changed in the village surrounding. The locals became quiet and guarded, whispered amongst themselves. Because Lorna McSorley hadn't been the only one who disappeared. A young Canadian backpacker had vanished only a month before. Around the same time, an elderly resident had been found dead, with her body parts removed, reportedly looking like a goddamn religious icon. A local councillor had stated that at least 10 people had gone missing in just under 5 years in that same region. Men, women, and children. And here's the part that you need to pay attention to. Their body parts had been removed. In one case, there was a child, and only her eyeball had been found squished into the ground. And some of the other bodies whose families were lucky enough to be found, all the parts that seemed to be missing had been taken deliberately. A missing brain, 2 hands cut cleanly off of a child's arms, a woman's pussy cut out like sushi, a man's genitalia scooped out like homosexual ice cream. Body parts all purposefully and cleanly removed. This wasn't a wild animal. And if it were an animal, it were the human variety. These weren't random acts of violence. This wasn't someone losing control. This were purposeful. And when violence has purpose, you're not dealing with chaos anymore. You're dealing with a system. And that's what scared the local police. And I guess if it weren't a mess, it would certainly do until one got there. Hathuka Mayeni, a pastor from a local church, said one of his congregants was among the victims who'd been found with body parts missing, and he said there were definitely signs of a Muti killing. And although his church and its congregants had held a protest over the police's lack of results, the police said there were no evidence that pointed to anyone, which seemed ridiculous since bodies were turning up all around them. They all believed the police must be involved, and high-powered people with money to spend. He believed that unfortunately it was the same old story, and that God had always treated the poor badly. And I guess to that point, it's hard to argue. When the English press arrived to investigate Lorna McSorley's disappearance, they discovered more than just inadequate sanitation facilities and an excellent selection of pirate DVDs. They found the villagers weren't too keen to talk to them, and they were met with a wall of silence. And those who did speak, off record of course, they all said the same thing, that they believed that Lorna McSorley's disappearance had something to do with Muti, an ancient, traditional form of medicine that the locals practiced, involving plants and herbs that they feel have healing qualities. But there's a small, more sinister side to this belief, where it's thought that human body parts bring wealth, protection, and power. Now, just for transparency's sake, for all of my listeners, I actually believe a little Muti myself and wear my uncle's big toe around my neck. And although I've never won the lottery, I have scored with a couple of hot chicks. But a word of warning, it does have an unpleasant odor and gets in the way when I'm eating my soup. But the practice of Muti also believes that certain bodies are considered more valuable. Children, albinos, and according to locals with knowledge of the practice, whites. That's racism. And with several of the missing being white, including 71-year-old Lorna McSorley and a 19-year-old Canadian female backpacker, it makes the belief in Muti even more sinister, considering the possibility that they weren't just missing tourists and that they'd been selected, I suppose, for their medicinal values. And what makes this concept, this theory, belief, or ancient folklore brought forward by a bunch of semi-savages who still shit on the dirt floor of the grass hut that they dine in, what makes the impossible almost feasible was that the private investigators hired by the rich farmers found mobile phone data, placing multiple devices at the exact spot where McSorley's crumpled up map was found. At roughly the same time, phones converging, stopping, then dispersing. And that's not a coincidence. That's coordination. And when the private mercenaries gave the police that information, they did nothing, even though several of the WhatsApp numbers are still active to this day. And in some accounts from locals, there's a disturbing claim that those involved in these crimes and kidnappings, they are not healers practicing this ancient medicine themselves, but scouts, people who identified their victims, track them, wait, and then kill them. Like something out of a goddamn Tarzan movie. And although there are these initial findings, some may even say evidence, this has led to no suspects, no interviews, or no arrests, which is no surprise. After all, this is a third world country that we're talking about. And I'll stop short of saying they carry spears, because, well, that would be offensive. But certainly if they're collecting body parts for the rich, they're the most corrupt police in the world. When embassies from other countries got involved and asked if this sort of thing is happening, why isn't it being stopped? Well, they were given an uncomfortable answer. Because belief protects it. And in some communities, there is a genuine fear that interfering with this kind of practice brings consequences. Spiritual consequences, social consequences, and even violent ones. And when fear becomes part of the system, people don't talk, they don't report, and they most certainly don't interfere. And that's how something like this survives, not in the open, but just on the precipice, a syphilitic secret on the lips of semi-savages. English authorities who came to investigate two of its missing citizens, well, they had to tread lightly, because Britain had its own history of this sort of unscrupulous medical practicing. Because in the 1980s and 90s, there were widespread evidence of ritual abuse, underground cults, and organized networks. One such incident on a late afternoon in September 2001, a passerby looking down near Tower Bridge in London spotted something drifting in the River Thames. At first, it looked like debris, something caught in the current, until it flipped over, just long enough to reveal what it really was. The torso of a young black boy, no older than 6 years old, floating alone in the water. When police pulled the body out, they realized almost immediately this wasn't an ordinary murder. The head and the limbs had been removed with precision. There was no blood in the remains, and the only thing left on him was a pair of bright orange shorts. Forensics work later suggested he hadn't been in the UK long, likely brought in from West Africa days before his death, and traces found in his body pointed to poisoning before he'd been killed. Detectives began to piece together a theory that unsettled even seasoned investigators. That this wasn't just a murder, but a ritual killing, possibly linked to beliefs that body parts could be used for power or protection. What followed after the discovery wasn't just an investigation. It was a nationwide appeal that reached beyond Britain. Police and media pushed the image of those small orange shores into every corner they could. Television, newspapers, international broadcasts, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize the child. And the boy, he was given a name, Adam, simply so he wouldn't remain completely anonymous. And appeals were translated into multiple languages and circulated across Europe and West Africa, where they believed the body had come from. Detectives worked with Interpol, traced textile origins, analyzed his diet through forensic science, and even reconstructed his final days from chemical traces in his body. They weren't just looking for a killer. They were trying to give a child his identity back. But despite one of the most extensive identification efforts in UK history, no family ever came forward. No one claimed him. And that, more than anything, is what stayed with the investigators. Not just how he died, but how completely he seemed to have been erased before anyone had even known he'd existed. And to this day, his killer, or killers, have never been found. When people think of a cult, they imagine robes and ceremonies, something organized in the way like a film would present it. But that's not how these sort of things work. If it exists, and evidence suggests that it does, it's not theatrical, it's not practical. It works more like a network, loose, unspoken. People who believe, and people who profit, and the people who supply, and the people who look the other way. In some accounts, there are individuals who act as scouts. They identify vulnerable targets, people alone, people who won't be immediately missed, people who can be approached without drawing attention. And once a target is identified, the rest happens quickly. There's no ritual or dramatic scene. It's functional, purpose-driven. Because the goal isn't the act itself. It's what comes after. And this is where it becomes difficult for investigators. Because you can't prove what didn't happen. You can only look what fits and what doesn't. And in this case, the absence is the loudest thing. Because accidents leave evidence. Animals leave evidence. Even time leaves evidence. But this, it doesn't behave like any of those. The only thing that screams out to any of the investigators is the diverging mobile phones that they were able to track to Lorna McSorley's location just before she disappeared, and also that of the 19-year-old female backpacker. Investigators were quick to point out that, yeah, sure, maybe they'd abducted the 19-year-old female for sexual purposes, but there was no way in hell someone abducted Lorna McSorley for that purpose. Both women were on the opposite end of the spectrum when it came to human desire, and there had to be something more to it. And this is where the title of this series actually means something. Because the people involved in this, if they exist, they don't stand in the open. They don't announce themselves. They don't operate in ways that can easily be tracked. They exist in the gaps between belief and evidence, between culture and crime, between what people know and what they're willing to say. Because any investigator will tell you that if you start pulling on a thread, more things will start coming to the surface. Because this wasn't a case of a couple of missing tourists. In 1994, in Botswana, a young woman named Sagmatsi Mogamitsi was found murdered, her body mutilated, her organs removed. It sparked riots. People just didn't think it was a killing. They believed it was a ritual, tied to power, tied to people higher up than anyone wanted to say out loud. Years later in South Africa, there were cases involving children being taken from rural areas. Bodies found with missing parts, lips, hands, genitals. The kind of removals that don't happen by accident. These weren't hidden crimes either. Communities, protests, families spoke out. But prosecutions never happened. And then there are the cases that don't even make it into the international news. Albino children were specifically targeted and their body parts removed in numerous cases, as they were considered the holy grail of body parts. Individuals taken from villages where everyone knows something happened, but no one can prove exactly what. And over time, a pattern shows, not consistent enough where cops can map it, regular enough where people know that there is something evil out in the jungle. If you ask officials, well, they'll tell you what any government body will tell you in any country around the world, that nothing's wrong. They'll say there is no organized cult. It's just a boogeyman made up by uneducated villagers. If you ask police, they'll tell you that these are isolated incidences. If you ask communities, you get a different answer. You get stories about people who suddenly had money, people who changed overnight, people who were known to visit traditional healers who dealt in things that weren't quite legal, and occasionally, very occasionally, the conversation drifts towards something more dangerous. That maybe this just doesn't sit at the bottom, and maybe it brushes up against the people with influence. Now there's no solid evidence tying politicians directly to these killings, but the belief that powerful people might benefit from them, that's enough. Because let's be honest, who of us out there can't picture a Nigerian politician wearing an albino child's dick around his neck for good luck? So when we come back full circle to Lorna McSorley and the 19-year-old British backpacker. What we have is no body, no explanation, just absence. And in a place like that, absence doesn't stay empty for long. It gets filled with stories, with rumors, with belief, and sometimes with something uncomfortably close to the truth. Something that can only exist in the realm of the shadow people. Now, if you guys like this here podcast, go sign up to Spotify or Apple or one of those other fucking podcasters. I don't fucking know names, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Go ahead, do it now. Don't fucking waste time, because you're probably on drugs or something now anyways, and probably in a stupor, so it'd be best to do it now.
When you wake from the memory of her shoulder, it's a summertime. As you think these memories will never fade. It was 25 and then some. Now it's years to pay. You were standing in the dark. When you wake from the memory of her shoulder, it's an honest mistake you fear. How'd you end up here? It's not that you do not love her for a reason. It's the music tonight. It is leading you astray. You're away. You and I, we were something for a reason.